What do you think of Putin saying that justification for continuing the war is denazification?
I thought it was one of the dumbest things I'd ever heard. I didn't even understand what it meant. Denazification?
It literally means what it sounds like.
You know, I have a lot of thoughts on this. I hate that whole conversation because it's not real. It's just ad hominem. It's a way of associating someone with an evil regime that doesn't exist anymore. But in point of fact, Nazism, whatever it was, is inseparable from the German nation. It was a nationalist movement in Germany. There were no other Nazis, right? There's no book of Nazism. Like, I want to be a Nazi. What is it? What does it mean to be a Nazi? There's no idea. There's no Mein Kampf. Mein Kampf is not Das Kapital, right? Mein Kampf is like, to the extent I understand it, it's like he's pissed about the Treaty of Versailles. Whatever. I'm very anti-Nazi. I'm merely saying there isn't a Nazi movement in 2024. It's a way of calling people evil. Okay, Putin doesn't like nationalist Ukrainians. Putin hates nationalism in general, which is interesting. And of course he does. He's got 80 whatever republics and he's afraid of nationalist movements. He fought a war in Chechnya over this. So I understand it, but I have I'm for nationalism, for American nationalism. So like I disagree with Putin on that. But calling them Nazis, it's like, I thought it was childish.
Well, I do believe that he believes it.
So that's so interesting. I agree with that. I was listening to this because in the United States, everyone's always calling everyone else a Nazi. You're a Nazi. Okay. But I was listening to this and I was like, this is the dumbest sort of not convincing line you could take. And I sat there and listened to him talk about Nazis for like 8 minutes. And I'm like, I think he believes this.
Yeah. And I actually, having had a bunch of conversations with people who are living in Russia, they also believe it. Now, there's technicalities here, which the word Nazi, World War II is deeply in the blood of a lot of Russians and Ukrainians.
I get it. So
you're using it as almost a political term. Yes. The way it's used in the United States also, like racism and all this kind of stuff. So you can really touch people if you use the Nazi.
I think that's totally right.
But it's also, to me, a really disgusting thing to do.
I agree.
Because, and also to clarify, there is neo-Nazi movements in Ukraine. They're just very small. You're saying that there's this distinction between Nazi and neo-Nazi. Sure. But it's a small percentage of the population, a tiny percentage. They have no power in government. I have seen no data to show they have any influence on Zelensky and the Zelensky government at all. So really, when Putin says denazification, I think he means nationalist movements.
I think you're right. And I agree with everything you said. And I do think that the Second World War occupies a place in Slavic society, Polish society, Central and Eastern Europe, that it does not occupy in the United States. And you can just look at the death totals, tens of millions versus less than 500,000. So it's like this eliminated a lot of the male population of these countries. So of course it's still resonant in those countries. I get it. I think I've watched the misuse of words, weaponization of words for political reasons for so long that I just don't like, and though I do engage in it sometime, and I'm sorry, I don't like just dismissing people in a word. Oh, he's a Nazi, he's a liberal or whatever. It's like, tell me what you mean. What don't you like about what they're doing or saying? And Nazi especially, I don't even know what the hell you're talking about.
What troubled me about that is because he said that that's the primary objective currently for the war. And that, because it's not grounded in reality, it makes it difficult to then negotiate peace. Because what does it mean to get rid of the Nazis in Ukraine? So he'll come to the table and say, well, okay, I will agree to do ceasefire once the Nazis are gone. Okay, so can you list the Nazis?
I totally agree. Plus, can you negotiate with a Nazi?
Right, exactly.
I totally agree with you.
It was very strange, but maybe it was perhaps had to do with speaking to his own population and also probably trying to avoid the use of the word NATO as the justification for the war.
Yes, that's all. Of course, I don't know, but I suspect you're right on both counts. But I would say it points to something that I've thought more and more since I did that interview, which was 2 weeks ago, I guess. I didn't think he was as a PR guy, not very good. Not good at telling his own story. The story of the current war in Ukraine is the eastward expansion of NATO and scaring the shit out of the Russians with NATO expansion, which is totally unnecessary, doesn't help the United States. NATO itself doesn't help the United States. And so I'm not pro-Russian for saying that. I'm pro-American for saying that. And I think that's a really compelling story because it's true. He did not tell that story. He told some other story that I didn't fully understand. Again, I'm not Russian. He's speaking to multiple audiences around the world. I'm not sure what he hoped to achieve by that interview. I will never know. But I did think that, like, this guy is not good at telling his story. And I also think, honestly, on the basis of a lot, I mean, I know this, very isolated during COVID. Very. We keep hearing that he's dying of this or that disease. He's got ALS. I mean, I don't know. I'm not his doctor. There's a ton of lying about it. I know that. But one thing that's not a lie is that he was cloistered away during COVID. I know this. And only dealing with 2 or 3 people. And that makes you weird. It's so important to deal with a lot of people, to have your views challenged. And you see this with leaders who stay in power too long. He's been in power 24 years, effectively. He's done it. You know, there's been upsides, I think, for Russia, the Russian economy, Russian life expectancy, but there are definitely downsides. And one of them is you get weird and you get autocratic. Like, this is why we have term limits. Very few kings don't get crazy in old age.
Yeah, and you said some of this also in your post-Kremlin discussion while you're in Moscow still, which was very impressive to me, that you can just openly criticize. This is great.
Well, I don't care.
I understand this. I just wish you did some more of that also with the supermarket video, and perhaps some more of that with Putin in front of you. But
Putin in front of me,
I understand.
Like, I'm such a good person.
I know you see it as virtue signaling.
Yeah, it is. Have you seen some of the interview he did with some NBC News child?
Yes, I understand. Oh. So I think you're just so annoyed by how bad journalists are that you just didn't want to be them.
Yeah, that's probably right,
and
actually.
Some great conversations will involve some challenging, like you were confused about denazification.
Well, first of all, I accept your criticism and I accept it as true that in some way I'm probably pivoting against what I dislike. And I have such contempt for American journalists on the basis of so much knowledge that I probably was like, I don't want to be like that. Fair. That is a kind of defensiveness and dumb. So you're right. As for the Nazi thing, I was like, I really felt like we were just speaking so far past each other that we would never like come to, I was like, I don't even know what the hell you're talking about. And and especially when I decided or concluded that he really meant it, I was like, that's just too freaking weird to me. It's almost like, yeah, I can think of many other examples where you're interviewing someone and they'll say something that's like, I was interviewing a guy one time and he started talking about the Black Israelites and we're the real Jews. And I was like, and it wasn't on camera, but I was like, it was so far out to me that I was like, we'll never kind of understand common terms on that.